Welcome back to Business Ethics. I'm Tom, and this video is discussing Adam Smith on capitalism. Um, Now, Adam Smith is kind of a famous philosopher, thinker, and also very famous for his text "Wealth of Nations." Right? Our selection is a small selection from that book, and he's really famous for Smith is for coming up with what's known as the invisible hand of the marketplace. So we're going to get there, right? So to kind of start, Smith really is interesting juxtaposition against Marx, right? Smith agrees with Marx about a lot of things about how capitalism functions, right? So for Adam Smith, he agrees that capitalism is essentially competitive, that it involves exploitation, and that it involves, a certain degree of like greed or self-interest, right? But he actually thinks he comes to a very opposite conclusion, right? Which he kind of thinks that self-interest, that competition, actually leads to a kind of self-organization of the market, right? So he's very much an advocate for the idea that the marketplace will kind of regulate itself. And he thinks that's also kind of built into the structure of capitalism, right? So he really starts off with a very simple premise, which is the idea that human beings fundamentally act out of self-interest, right? They're fundamentally selfish, right? This goes hand in hand with the idea of ethical egoism, right? Although this might be like psychological egoism, it just says that human beings are self-interested, right? People are interested in advancing their own ends, right? They want more stuff for themselves, right? They want themselves to be happy. And that's what fundamentally motivates them, right? Now, the way I like to think about this, since we're talking about the marketplace, is to think about, people in the marketplace with respect to kind of their position in the marketplace, right? So I say like business owners, right, and investors, right? They have self-interest. The reason what you want as a business owner is for your business to be successful, turn a profit, right? If you're an investor, your interest is to get a return on your investment, right? If you're an employee, you have interest as an employee to try to get more pay for your job, better working conditions, better hours, all that kind of stuff, right? If you're a consumer, right, you have interests as a consumer, right, which are to get the best products for the cheapest prices in the most convenient way possible, right? Those are just kind of like generic interests you have, right? And of course, you can play different roles. You can be an employee and a consumer. Most people are, right? You can be a business owner and an employee. Sometimes you can be a business owner and a consumer, all this kind of stuff, right? Now, what Smith notes is that what's distinct about human self-interest is that we recognize that cooperation is instrumental in furthering our self-interest, right? That we can actually get more stuff when we work together, right? And this is kind of essential to understanding how the marketplace works in general, right? And I give some examples of this, right? So in trade, right? We talked about this with Marx, right? This kind of exchanging commodities for money and going back and forth. The real advantage to like the marketplace is that, for example, if I'm a really good gardener, but I don't know how to do lots of other stuff, right? I can grow vegetables and bring them to the marketplace, sell those, and then use that money to buy other stuff, right? That I don't know how to make, right? So I don't know how to make clothes. I don't know how to make tools. I don't know how to make shelter or houses or whatever. I don't know. I don't have means of transportation. I can focus on one craft and do that and still enjoy the benefits of all kinds of other crafts, right? And someone else can do the same thing, right? Someone else can be a blacksmith and that's all they have to do, right? And then they can sell whatever they make or whatever their service to other people who can't do those things, right? And that allows you to kind of specialize, right, and just focus on that one craft. And then this also works within like a business, right, or an operation, right? So if you have a company, you can have one person that just does like numbers, right, accounting. That's all they do, right? And then you have one person that just does maintenance, right? And then you have one person that just works on the floor, right? And then you have one person that just manages stuff, right? Um, and they just only do that job, and then they can kind of refine those skills and become better and better at them, right? And since everyone's kind of delegated to those specific tasks, that operation can work much smoother and be much more efficient, right? Um, and this also works at the level of the marketplace in general, right? You start to see a certain degree of cooperation, understanding between buyers and sellers and investors and all kinds of people, right? Um, you see, companies or businesses will um, if they sell a bad product, they'll replace it for free, or they'll make sure to be at, open their business at the times that they say they do. They'll stay open longer, make things more available, all that kind of stuff, honor their contracts, all these kinds of things, because they recognize that those kinds of business practices, right, facilitate more consumers, right, more business activity, and that facilitates more profit, right? So the more a business does right by consumers, the more business they'll be able to do, more profit they turn, right? This is kind of the essence of what Smith's getting at, right? That acting out of self-interest, if you really think it through, is also acting out of the interest of others to a certain extent, right? But ultimately, it is self-interest that's really driving all of those activities, right? Now, he thinks once we kind of have this more refined self-interest, right, what emerges is what he calls the invisible hand, right? And these are kind of norms, rules, policies, other kinds of things that really provide a kind of self-regulation of the marketplace, right? Because I'm concerned about keeping my business afloat, and you're concerned about keeping your business afloat. And because of that, we both kind of are mostly honest with each other. We honor our contracts, all this kind of stuff, right? And um, uh, more than that, um, as I want to get more market share and as things become more competitive, I start to be more innovative with my products, right? I start to add things onto them. I start to, pursue different avenues, right? So, for example, if you have a pizza shop and I have a pizza shop, and then I start to think, well, what if I, box up my pizzas and I deliver them to your door, right? And then another pizza shop says, well, what if I freeze them and I sell them to customers and they can make them whenever they want, right? And we want to get more of that market share, and that creates innovation, right? And that starts to benefit society quite a bit, right? We've had lots and lots of innovation in technology over the past few hundred years that's been really, really important in shaping our lives, making things very much more convenient, making things safer, making things, just better, right? So the overall idea of this invisible hand is that the more we focus on self-interest, right, and furthering our self-interest, what we do kind of inadvertently is we start to promote the good of society, right? As I'm trying to make more money in my industry, I'm doing things to further that industry for society as a whole, right? And it's called the invisible hand because, as Smith kind of says, it's not the main intention, right? Your focus is on self-interest and just making more money and making your own life better. But through doing that, it has this kind of byproduct of furthering the interests of society. This is why it's an invisible hand, right? And this is really important because Smith is going to really advocate for a profit first view of business, right? And the reason why is because he thinks that if you start to think about the social good and make that kind of your primary aim, then that whole system that we've been describing starts to fall apart, right? Self-interest is really the engine of a capitalist system. It's an engine of the marketplace, right? And the innovation only works if, or the kind of invisible hand only emerges if everyone's focusing on their own self-interest, right? That's what kind of makes everything go smooth, right? You can imagine that innovation, for example, might be stifled if we're always kind of thinking about society as a whole rather than people kind of making those advances pursuits to just kind of make more money, right? When you're kind of, I mean, if you think about like startups and whatnot, the kind of motivation of making money really kind of pushes people to do things and to be very productive and all that kind of stuff. So this is really Smith's kind of take. So he really thinks a lot of the same things about capitalism that Marx thinks are bad, Smith thinks are good, right? And so they're just very opposing views of capitalism, and they'll be good to have with us as we consider other kind of ethical issues in business, right? Having the ethical theory coupled with views about what capitalism is should kind of give us a very kind of good ground by which to analyze these business ethical situations, right? Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and we will talk soon.